We have one more storyteller for the evening, and I'm going to introduce her, and she's been my co-MC here. So we're going to hear a story from Polly Andrews, and I'm going to give you a little bit more background on her. Polly was born and raised in the Bethel area within the villages of Chivak and Lower Kalskag. She's half Chupik, Eskimo, and half Norwegian. After spending her high school years in Fairbanks, she moved to Anchorage in 2006 to pursue a degree in human services at UAA. Her highlight of this year was getting married to her sweetheart, Ozzy, in June, and then leaving on a week-long honeymoon to her family's fish camp, we saw it up there, on the Kuskokwim River with their two small children. In her spare time, Polly enjoys performing Chupik and Yupik song and dance, traditional storytelling, as well as traveling back to her home villages for dance festivals and subsistence fishing. Please welcome Polly Andrews.
So I want to talk about food. I want to talk about good food. And when, growing up on the Kuskokwim River, and being raised on the summer months on a fish camp, there was different really delicious traditional ways that we prepared our fish. One of the ways we prepared them was hanging them up in the smokehouse to dry our salmon so we could keep eating it over the winter months. One of the ways that we prepared is we took the salmon eggs out and we cook it in soup and made muluk soup or fish egg soup. Some communities pickle fish. We like to salt our fish. So there's a few different delicious ways of traditionally preparing your food. But my favorite all-time traditional dish is uksunak, fermented fish heads. Has anyone here, raise your hand if you've heard of fermented fish heads. Raise your hand if you've eaten fermented fish heads. Woo! So the way we prepare them is we cut the head off of the king salmon and we rinse it off and we bury it. We dig a shallow hole in the ground a couple of feet deep and we bury these king salmon heads in the hole and we allow them to sit in the ground and ferment. And it really all depends on the time of year in the summer month or the temperature, how much the sun is shining. But we're able to tell that the head is perfectly fermented when we go and check them and there's bumps raised up on the skin. That means the fermented fish head, the uksunak, is ready to eat. So what I wanted to share with you are some of the encounters that I've had with the great uksunak, the great fermented stinkhead. This one time my auntie, her name is Balasa, she's from Kalskag, but right now she lives in North Pole, and she lives in a, regular urban neighborhood, and she has neighbors over here and neighbors over there. And one day she said, I miss having uksunak. I want to bury heads in my yard, in my front yard. But she felt embarrassed, and she didn't want to. She told me, she said, I waited until midnight to take my bag of fish heads to my front yard to bury them. I didn't want my neighbors to see me digging a hole. And I said, how come you didn't want them to see you digging a hole? What's the big deal? And she said, I didn't want them to think I was burying Fred. Fred is her longtime lover, and I don't blame her for ever wanting to bury Fred. He's a very stubborn Gwich'in Athabascan man, but I'm not telling a story about burying Fred. I'm telling a story about burying fish heads. So anyways, the midnight sun comes out. It's midnight in North Pole, and she goes out there with her bag of raw fish heads, and she looks to her right. Everybody in the house is soundly sleeping, and she looks to her left. Everybody's sleeping, so she puts her bag. She begins digging her hole. Just thinking of that fermented, yummy flavor that's going to be ready in about 2 weeks. So she begins digging away. All of a sudden, she hears a voice. It's the old Kasak man, the old white man from next door, and he says, Balasa, what are you doing? Startled, she looks to him and she says, "I'm digging a hole." And he's really curious why she's digging a hole in the middle of the night. "Why are you digging a hole, Balasa?" And she was fed up at this point. Man, she got busted digging her hole. She looked at him, "Fermented fish heads!" And to this day, I wonder what that poor old man thought when she said fermented fish heads. For what? And this one time, I had traveled back to my village a couple of winters ago for the Russian Orthodox Slavic holiday, and it was in January. And I was visiting my auntie in her little log cabin, and she said, "Hey, Polly, you want duksunak?" She said, "I got some in my freezer." And I said, "Ooh, yes." So she went to her freezer where she had stored her leftover uksunak from the summertime, and she busted it out, really stinky, and she looked at me and she said, "You better not tell your other aunties that I let you eat uksunak with me, or else they might get mad because I didn't share." And I said, "No, don't worry. It'll be our secret. Nobody has to know that I ate uksunak with you." So we sat on the floor and we dug in and we were eating like little cave people or something, just consuming, buguking, eating the flesh off these fermented heads was so delicious. And I got up and I thanked her for the fabulous meal. I never thought I'd be eating fermented heads in January. And as I was going out the door, she gave me this look and she said, "You better not tell him." And I said, "I won't tell him." So I went home. When I got home, our house was filled with the other aunties. And one of them says, "Let's go take a maqi. Let's go to the steam bath. Let's all take a steam bath." And so we all piled into the steam bath and, getting ready for our steam. One of my aunties begins sniffing the air. And she said, "I smell uksunak." And all of them looked straight at me. Evil looks in their eyes. I felt scared like a deer in the headlight. And she looked at me, her eyes piercing into me, and she said, "Did you eat uksunak?" And I said, "Yes, I ate uksunak." She looked at me again. All of them were staring at me. "Where you get?" And there was no lying. There's no lying. I had to tell them, "Auntie Mary." And then they were silent and I was silent. And I continued my steam bath in shame that I had secretly eaten this uksunak without them. So the next day I went to go have coffee with my Auntie Mary, and I walked in her door and she was looking at me. She had this expression of just pure nunuk, like you're gonna scold someone. She looked at me. "I told you not to tell him. How come you told your aunties you had uksunak in my house?" And I said, "I didn't tell them. They smell them." Thank you very much.